Hello, Packers fans. Welcome to another edition of the Green 19 podcast. My name is JR Radcliffe. I am joined by my colleagues at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and PackersNews.com, Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood. The Packers are through family night at this point, ramping up for their first preseason game against the Cleveland Browns. We know that a lot of starters are going to be playing, including quarterback Jordan Love. How about that? Jordan Love, starting quarterback, QB1, playing in a preseason game. It's a new era in Green Bay. First and foremost, guys, I need to know that if you were on a field with a jugs machine that was sending punts into the air and you had 3 opportunities to catch a ball, how well do you think you would do? Ryan, do you think you could catch more than 1 or 2? Maybe all 3?
I don't know if I can catch 1. Yeah. Honestly, that's way more difficult than it appears, right? Especially now. Here's the key question, JR. Do I have a helmet on or not?
Yes.
What about shoulder pads?
We'll say yes to the shoulder pads.
All right, the shoulder pads get bouncy. That's where it gets difficult. In the helmet in your field of vision, like that's the reason why I was more of a defensive player in high school. The hands part, that is tricky. I would not have returned punts. Now I imagine Spoon would have 4 though, right? Right, Spoon?
Yeah. I would get the one that got stuck in my face mask. That would be 1.
Yeah.
That was the most incredible thing I've seen in 11 family night practices. 11. I've covered Aaron Rodgers. I've covered Julius Peppers. I've covered Clay Matthews, Jordy Nelson. That is the most incredible thing I've seen in a family night practice. That kid catching and holding on to 3 punts at once. JR Alexander only got 2. And JR Alexander returned punts in Louisville. Like in college, I remember when they drafted him in the first round, that was part of what they were kind of attracted to. Now, obviously, JR Alexander doesn't need to be returning punts now. He's a top corner in the league. But, like, he's done this, and he got 2. That kid got 3. I could not believe it. I almost fell over dead in my chair. It was unbelievable.
Of course, we were talking about Trace Ramirez, an 11-year-old from Waupun who caught 3 punts in a row while holding the other footballs that he had just caught during the family night scrimmage, surrounded by Packers players on the field. Celebrated an incredible moment. I got a chance to talk to him. So if you haven't caught up with that story, feel free to check that out at jsonline.com. Obviously, there were a lot of other important things for the Packers to notice, I guess, on family night. It's just really a glorified practice, but I imagine there were some takeaways. We've had another practice now on Tuesday as well. Tom,
wait, JR, you can't leave us there. Give us a little tease for what this kid had to say.
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, I was impressed that he didn't really have like any training in this. Like, he's 11, so I don't know why he would ever field a punt that's like above his head. But he said it was just dad in the backyard with he's got 2 older brothers. He's got a younger sister as well. And they just practiced a little bit in the backyard. He said there weren't good spirals, but his dad was kicking them to him because he knew he'd be participating with like 3 days notice in this particular event. He said he was just really impressed. He thought all the players were very tall. He said they're all like 6 feet tall. And I'm like, yeah, the short ones are 6 feet tall.
Right?
I did appreciate that. Pretty unflappable kid. Pretty, like he said, it's really hard to catch the punts. He wasn't like, oh yeah, it was easy. He was just like, yeah, it's really hard. I got lucky kind of, I guess. I mean, he was really a good kid. TV stations were out at their practice yesterday. So he's a celebrity, easily the star of family night. I don't know who the other star would necessarily be. Again, it's a glorified practice, but Tom, as we get closer now, I guess I'm kind of looking off the top for just a progress report of, as we get closer, knowing that the starters are going to be appearing in this Cleveland game, this first preseason game, there are, I imagine, still some questions that still have to be answered as to who those starters are going to be. But, as you wrote at Packers News, like especially with the offense, we kind of know most of these guys. Offensive line is looking more and more set, although we'll talk a little more about Jordan Morgan leaving Tuesday's practice. So, again, this question that I keep coming up with, what do you still want to learn? What do you still need to know as it relates to who the starting lineup is for this Green Bay Packers team? It feels more and more cemented with every passing day. Are there still some pretty big ones lingering out there, questions lingering out there for you?
No, I don't think there are any. I mean, everything would be a backup position. They are lacking some depth, maybe at tackle, maybe probably not at guard or center, but maybe a little bit of depth. But they always have Elton Jenkins to bail them out of everything. So No, there's no starting positions that are up for grabs, really. I mean, I think everything is solidified. You know, you got your top 4 wide receivers, you got your top 2 running backs, plus probably a third with Marshawn Lloyd. You got your top 2 tight ends, Musgrave and Kraft came back to practice today. You know, what else is there? Why? There's just nothing else. So I think they're set.
Ryan, do you have anything that jumps out? I mean, I imagine you're agreeing with Tom here that it's pretty much pretty clear who's going to be out there on day one.
I think the biggest question for the offensive line right now is who will be the swing tackle. It's not the starting 5. The starting 5 is pretty well set. Is it going to be Andre Dillard or Kadeem Telfer as the swing tackle? I think you look at your top 5 again. Jordan Morgan dropped out of practice today, but assuming he'll be good for the opener, he'll be the right guard. The top interior backup appears to be Sean Ryan. We don't know who the top backup, swing tackle is between Telford and Dillard, but that gives you 7, maybe 8 if they keep both. Jacob Monk could give them 9 as another guy that can play all 3 interior as a backup. Maybe they stick at 9. Maybe they add, Glover, the rookie that they drafted this spring, as a 10th. But I mean for all offseason, we talk about how there's going to be competition. It's going to be a lot of moving parts, and then they get to camp, and it's pretty set in stone. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I don't know if you have a read on if that's a good thing. I mean, I think in general, you always like to have competition with young guys, but it also, if there's not going to be competition, it would indicate that they like what they have. So I don't know.
Spoon, Jordan.
I mean,
go ahead.
I think, anytime you have the positions filled and they're not filled by old guys, who are declining, and they're guys who had performed, I think you're in pretty good shape. But then it just comes down to depth.
Spoon, Jordan Morgan, as you've written, seems to have had a pretty good camp, to kind of build himself up to the point that it looks like he's going to be at least in a timeshare at worst starting as a guard. We don't really know. Sean Ryan might sub in a little bit like they did last year with John Runyon, but he has really proven that he can handle it. He does leave practice on Tuesday, so I know that's, there's, I guess, some questions there that the Packers won't be starting with Zach Tom either on that first preseason game as they kind of work him slowly back. Injury-wise, though, this team hasn't had any injuries. They haven't had any of those bad luck, sudden, oh my gosh, a guy on the 2 deep tore his ACL, happens almost to everybody in every camp. We were talking a few days ago that was, I think you probably just chalk that up to luck, but is there more to it? This is, I think, the same process that they followed in previous camps, right? So I think it's just a good luck at this point. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, you can point to the fact that they have a new strength and conditioning staff, a new strength and conditioning coach. Now, whether that is the reason why they're not having injuries, I don't know. I always think it's luck plays a huge part in it. How much the stress load is on players during camp, but you can't stop hamstrings from happening or guys injuring themselves colliding with each other or stepping the wrong way or whatever. I think they've just been really lucky so far. Even Morgan, his injury, it's not like he dropped to the ground and had to be helped off the field. He walked off the field and went into the training center. Guys like rookie Edgerrin Cooper, that they've just been real careful with him. I think he's got a hip injury, so they're not rushing him back. Josh Jacobs had a tiny little groin injury, and they were like, "Oh, we'll take him out." So I think they're being really careful with guys before the injury gets going, and I think they have been lucky.
So, Ryan, we've heard the name now, Edgerrin Cooper and Jordan Morgan, 2 of the top draft picks in this class for 2024. I asked a question several podcasts ago, which rookie we thought would make the biggest impact, or at least was on track to making the biggest impact. You wrote about Javon Bullard as well at PackersNews.com. He's in that equation as well. As you've seen things, I think a lot of these rookies, it's not even clear if they'll make the 53-man roster. You mentioned, guys like Glover and Monk, they have a leg up, but it's possible they just end up on the practice squad at this point. Do you do you think it's one of those three guys, those first three guys? If not, I'd be interested to know who it is. And even if among those three, who do you think really stands out as, this guy's really going to be a player for the Packers in 2024?
It's early, but I think to this point in camp, for me, the two safeties, the first two safeties of the three, Javon Bullard and Evan Williams, probably have been the most impressive rookies to me, which I think is very significant, because, I mean, honestly, I forget what it's like to watch a Packers defense where the safeties aren't a problem.
Yeah.
And this is, potentially be actually a very good back end because, Xavier McKinney brings it. And then Javon Bullard has looked the part since day one. Evan Williams has looked good enough to play safety, which begs the question, how long till Javon Bullard's in the slot? How long until he's pushing Keyshawn Nixon for snaps? Good problems to have, right? There's some depth there, and that means there's some options there. Nothing against, I think, Jordan Morgan came in and is the starting right guard, and he has looked every bit the part of a first-round pick in one-on-ones. Even today, he did take part in one-on-ones today, and he stonewalls Devontae Wyatt, a first-round pick in his own right, on a bull rush. And then I don't know if he's, at some. It looks like most likely it was. We don't know this, but one-on-ones, according to the timeline of today, would have been perhaps where he got injured. So I don't know if he was healthy for this rep or not. But Kenny Clark beat Jordan Morgan on a speed rush, to which I tweeted, you don't get defensive tackles in college with that kind of speed that Kenny Clark has. Like, it's just a welcome to the NFL. Nothing against Jordan Morgan there. In one-on-ones, he's looked very good. And if he's a starting right guard, you're talking about four-figure snap count, over 1,000 snaps potentially in 2024. That's a big impact. I think Edgerrin Cooper still is going to play plus 800 snaps, if he stays healthy, because he's going to be most likely in the nickel. He's got tremendous speed, a lot to like there. So, those are four guys right now. And I do think for us, if you look at the past couple of years and Brian Gutekunst in the draft, he gets the benefit of the doubt. He is just hit and hit and hit. It's not just these big draft classes he's bringing in. There's a lot of talent, a lot of hits in these big draft classes. But to me, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, both look quite good right now. They look ready to play, and that means good things for the back end of that Packers defense.
Tom, I want to go to special teams, and not even just the kicking competition, which we've talked about. And there've been kind of some more twists and turns. Anders Carlson had a nice family night. It was very windy on Tuesday, so I don't think anybody had a particularly good night. The kickoff in particular, the kickoff that is going to, I think, really blow people's minds when we get to that part of this, when they finally see for the first time what the new kickoff looks like, how that could impact Keyshawn Nixon. Of course, now a two-time All-Pro in that discipline as a kick returner. We could also talk about Daniel Whelan, who's I think looked pretty good in camp. It sounds like. I mean, this is a guy that's kind of unheralded, but has been really, I think, has looked strong. I wonder if you feel like this is the year that the Packers special teams really breaks through. It had been, I think, maybe a little disappointing when they brought in Rich Bisaccia to not see this team make dramatic steps forward in their overall special teams game. But it feels like, especially with the depth they're going to have on this team, it feels like they're going to have a pretty good handle on that side of things. How do you feel about special teams in general?
I have not gone out and bet my house on their special teams within the top half of the NFL because that is a sucker's bet. Their special teams is always a problem. It's just, it's just the way it is. I don't know. I think that kicking thing has to be settled. And boy, the season could come down to a kick like that. A really important kick. I mean, the Chiefs just signed Harrison Butker to the richest deal. And how many big kicks has that guy hit, to send them into the Super Bowl and win it? I think that's going to have a huge bearing on their season as who they pick there. I think, when you have a young team and it's talented and you have a lot of draft picks, you have the potential for a good special teams. You should be better a year later when a really big class of rookies comes in and now they're second-year players, and that's the case. but the kicking thing could just kill you. So they got to get that right. They absolutely have to get that right. I think they got the punting thing right, and I suspect their coverage and return. They have returners. They got Keyshawn Nixon. They got Jaden Reed. It might just come down to how well they kick.
They brought in a third kicker this week, which really surprised me. I thought that it was settled between the two guys with Greg Joseph and Anders Carlson, but clearly there are other things they're still looking at. So yeah, I don't know. That I could see that being one of the last things decided as they try to figure out what's going on with this roster. Ryan, on just kind of a check-in again with the defense. It sure seems pretty great right now. It seems like everything is clicking. You saw Rashawn Gary once again have a really nice night on family night. It feels like they have all their ducks in the row. We've talked at length about the interceptions and how they seem to be just much more aggressive in the secondary. You mentioned the safeties already. What still lingers as far as maybe the assembly of the roster, but just in general with the move to the new scheme? What still is out there that you want to see cleared up in your mind before you can say for sure, okay, this Packers defense really is going to be good in 24?
Tackling.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him tackle yet. It's real good. It's real easy to look good as a defense when you're not tackling. You just got to be in the right spot, fly around, run around, know what you're doing, know where you're supposed to be. That's pretty easy. The tackling's the hard part. So, they're going to be playing their starters this preseason. Presumably that means a lot of defensive starters in Cleveland. They'll be tackling for the first time. It'll be good to see what they have. You can't evaluate defense without tackling. It's too important part of big of an element in the overall way the game's played. So, that's the short answer. Tackling. Need to see him tackle.
Yeah, it was Badgers defensive coordinator on media day, Mike Tressel. He was like, there's no other discipline in sport where you want somebody to be the best they can, and they can't actually rep that thing over and over and over and over, because if they were to live tackle, people would get injured. They would not have the situation where everybody's healthy. So it is a difficult thing, and until you see those live sets, you may not know for sure what you've got there. Spoon, I have to ask again a little bit about Jordan Love, but I also want to ask about the receivers. It seems, no secret, it seems like this is a really good group of receivers. All of them were productive last year. I don't think we've ever talked about how there's been a little made about whether or not they're going to have a number one receiver or whether it's going to be just by consensus, if that matters. It sure doesn't seem, maybe it probably matters to fantasy football owners, but it doesn't really matter to the Packers, I would think. I think you've said in the past you still feel like Christian Watson is a little bit of a notch above those other guys, at least in terms of ceiling and potential, that he could be a guy who is your number one and your deep threat and all the things that you expect out of a top receiver. But I don't know how you feel today. If you think, Jaden Reed led them in receptions last year. He's obviously more of a slot guy. They have, Dontavian Wicks could take a step forward. Bo Melton even could take a step forward. How do you sort of look at these receivers? What do you think of when you think of this receiving group?
I think of it as four. I think four top receivers, and the way they're going to line up is any one of those four could be in the starting lineup. They line up with three. It could be any one of those three. So I really think that they don't have a number one. I think really I've been kind of on Dontavian Wicks' bandwagon since he was in training camp last year. And I do think eventually he might wind up being the best of them all. But I just don't see anybody, standing out above the other right now. It's going to be who gets the best chemistry with Love and who does he really have a great chemistry with. And, Romeo Doubs has had a really good camp. I think it's gonna be split up pretty good.
Ryan, you said on the last podcast you're old enough to remember when Jordan Love was asked to just rip it, not think, and that now he is well past the point where that's something he has to think about consciously. What about the deep ball? Some of what makes good receivers is being able to go get a deep ball, and Jordan Love has not always been the most accurate at that, but we have seen him hit some good ones in both practice. I think Family Night he had a pretty good one as well. I don't know overall if you've seen elite accuracy in his first week plus of practice, but it sure seems like he's capable at this point in his career of hitting those deep balls. you have any thoughts on that, on how you've seen Jordan Love progress here in the first 10 days of him being in pads?
I'm seeing a much more confident guy than we've seen in the past. I think that the success he had in the second half of last season has done wonders for him as a starting point for this year. Look, it's, we got to see him play, right? But in practice, we're seeing signs that, one, he's more confident, two, he's adding elements to his game that maybe weren't as integral as before. The deep ball, he's already hit Christian Watson, I believe, on 2 deep balls in team reps. But today, what stood out to me is he had 2 30-yard hits on scrambling to flushing the pocket right, getting outside the pocket and play extensions. He hit Dontavian Wicks and Christian Watson for 30 yards apiece. I think that when you talk about confidence from a quarterback's perspective, what happens when the play breaks down and it is extended, making plays out of that's directly tied to confidence. We've seen that more in this camp than we did for sure a year ago. I think last season, as the season went on, we saw it more and more. But I would say we've even seen it more in this camp than last season. And look, the guy that came before him, Aaron Rodgers, he was known for his play extension. I mean, that's a big part of being a quarterback. So that stood out to me. As far as the receivers go, I agree with Spoon. There's a top 4. But I also think – the question to me is, what's more impressive, the top-end talent that they have with those top 4 or the depth? Because as a 5th and 6th receiver, Bo Melton and Malik Heath, you can do a whole lot worse than. Grant DeBose has put together plays in this camp a way that he was out with a back injury last camp. He wasn't able to be on the field. He's shown plays. Samori Toure, to me, is an NFL caliber receiver. He has shown himself to be an NFL caliber receiver. That's what, another 4 guys? How many rosters in the league legitimately go 8 deep with NFL caliber receivers? It's an uncommon depth that they have. So as impressive as that top 4 is, when injuries happen, when there's attrition, they ought to feel like they can put a Bo Melton out there and he can make plays. You can get by a week or 2 with that. We saw that last season. That's a huge benefit for an offense to have. And I think that the best thing that Jordan Love has shown to do is that he's a relentless machine in this offense, taking what the defense gives, taking what the playbook offers and spreading it to whoever's open. There's not a lot of, 12 forcing it to 17 over and over again in this offense as we've seen in the past. This is Jordan Love. Whoever's open, he's going to throw to, and he's got a lot of options.
All the receivers, we haven't even talked a lot about the tight ends this year. And Tom, you made mention of that on the last podcast, how you hadn't seen much from Luke Musgrave, and you didn't know if that was a function of the offense or if that's Musgrave. Tucker Kraft just came back from a torn pec muscle, so he wasn't out there. But obviously those 2 guys were tremendous as rookies, or certainly showed that they could be a big part of what the Packers are doing on offense. As you've given it some thought, do you feel like the offense is de-emphasizing tight end usage as pass catchers a little bit this year, or is that a function of how you think Musgrave has played, or is it just a situation where we just don't have a lot of data, a lot of reps that are geared towards tight ends at this point?
Yeah, I asked LaFleur about it after the practice Saturday night, and he basically said that, they haven't had an opportunity to highlight certain positions. He said sometimes they'll go and realize they haven't, spent a lot of time calling plays for tight ends, or maybe calling plays for, the split end or whatever it is. And I think they did kind of get away from throwing to the tight end. I thought they showed a little bit more today, that they were willing to throw to the tight end. Musgrave had a couple throws downfield, kind of missed one of them. Tucker Kraft came back today, although he's not going to take part in any team drills probably not till next week, and he definitely won't play against Cleveland. But I think some of it is the tight ends, and some of it is just they haven't really gotten around to that part of the game. Last year they came in, and Luke Musgrave he had a green jersey, which means throw to the green jersey. Anytime you see that green jersey open, throw it to him. They wanted him ready to be a starter on day one, and that hasn't been the case this year. And I actually am interested to see if Tucker Kraft starts to move ahead just a little bit on the pecking order, because he did so well at the end of last year. Musgrave still has, I think he still needs some work. Kraft needed work at the beginning of last year, and I think he just really kind of blossomed. So it'll be interesting to see when they're both back, and I think we'll see more tight ends after that.
Importantly, with Tucker Kraft, spoke with him today. He said he was very, very affirmative that he will be ready for the regular season opener in Brazil against the Eagles. He said that he sees no reason why that won't be why that will be an issue for him to miss. So even though he's not taking team reps yet, expect him to be playing on the field week 1 against the Eagles in Brazil. I asked Tucker Kraft point blank. I said, at any point last season, did you feel like the best version of you and Luke Musgrave was on the field together? And he said at no point did he feel that way, because it wasn't until the second half when Tucker Kraft started getting rolling. And at that point, Luke Musgrave was out with an injury. And then they came back a little bit late in the season, but Luke Musgrave was still coming back from the injury. That's a hell of a thing to consider, because that's 2 really good tight ends that never did kind of showcase what they can do together at full capacity. And I asked Tucker Kraft what he envisions that to be like. And before I did, I said, I have an idea, and I want you to tell me if my assessment's fair or not. If I'm wrong, I want you. So, Luke Musgrave's basically, he's the seam stretcher. He stretches the defense vertically in the passing game. Not that Tucker Kraft can't do that, because we saw him catch a 40-yarder in New York last year, but that's not really his primary game, right? Tucker Kraft is more catch it underneath. Once that field's stretched by Luke Musgrave, catch it underneath. He's the yak guy. He agreed. Yeah, I'm the yak guy. So you've got a field stretching tight end with a tight end that can make a ton of plays with the football in his hands underneath, that we have not yet seen together flourish at full capacity in this offense. That's a dangerous thing. I mean, that should, the way it looks on paper, that should be a big deal, especially for an offense that you can go back to Jermichael Finley. 10 years been searching for one tight end like this. That's a big deal.
All right, so let's move to some really important stuff. Fashion. Spoon, are you in or out on the all-white helmet? How do we feel about that? Didn't ask you that on the last podcast. Yeah. It had just come out that they were going to have the winter warning look.
JR, this is the type of hard-hitting content I've been wanting to get from Spoon, so thank you. Thank you for your service.
Well, I appreciate you not asking me about it last time, and I appreciate if you didn't ask me about it this time, because I could care less. I could really care less. The only thing I care about is whether I'm going to be able to see the numbers on the players. From, up at the top of the Eiffel Tower in Lambeau Field. That's all I really care about. And, I could go on a soapbox about how the NFL suckers everybody into, buying all this crap for one jersey, for one game, and then they promote this winter whiteout thing. And guess what? The pro shop happens to have a crap load of this stuff for really, really expensive money.
Preach.
Boy, what a coincidence. How did that happen? So, I don't even like to promote that stuff, because all it is a big money grab, and they're just trying to stick it even further to the average fan,
Yeah. All right. Well, fair enough. It's true.
JR, better you ask him than me. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I thought that might be the place to go. I was not disappointed. What aren't we talking about, though? Because honestly, it feels really hunky-dory. The Packers, everybody's healthy. They have a lot of their spots spoken for. They're going to be pretty dang good. They have a good quarterback who's signed forever. Honestly, I feel like I should be asking more cynical questions. Every time I kick off a Brewers podcast, it's, here are the 5 things that went wrong this week. And it's not like that here. I know it's preseason, but it just doesn't feel like, it just feels kind of, everything's good. But there's got to be something. What am I missing, Ryan? What haven't we talked about yet?
Well, Spoon, stop me if I get carried away here, okay? Just shout me down. But to me, when you look at this roster, I see one question, one significant question going into the season. It's the kicking game, right?
Sure.
Do they have a guy in this roster that can make big kicks late in the season in clutch situations? Everywhere else, I see talent, I see depth, I see youth. I'm not saying I don't There might be a glaring weakness. I don't know yet, but I don't see it right now. The corners have played well. I wondered about the corners coming in, but Jair Alexander's looked like Jair Alexander. He's taken on a much more serious tone throughout the entire offseason. At this point, he's been available, present, accountable. Seems like he's been everything that the Packers want him to be. Eric Stokes is healthy, and if he's healthy, he's playing well, right? So if he stays healthy, you got Carrington Valentine behind him as a pretty solid third corner. That's looked good so far. We'll see if it holds up this fall. Safeties. They got Xavier McKinney, a crown jewel of free agency. Two really good young guys next to him that have been good so far. They got to show it in the season. But I think Brian Gutekunst gets the benefit of the doubt in his recent draft history that these guys are ready to play. Linebacker, Edgerrin Cooper, Quay Walker, pretty good battery. Defensive line, I think, is the absolute strength of this defense. There's a lot of talent, a lot of speed, a lot of depth on the defensive line. And I think this 4-3 is going to match them really, really well because it's all about getting in a track stance and blowing off the ball. And that's what they do well. They got Jordan Love at quarterback. It all starts there. They got a top 4 receiver, and they go maybe 8 deep. Like, pretty good receiving core. Josh Jacobs, one of the best running backs in the NFL. Marshawn Lloyd's looked pretty good. I'm curious to see him actually get tackled, but he's looked pretty good. A.J. Dillon as a third potentially running back. Like, there's depth there. They have 2 tight ends that are better than any one tight end over the past decade. So, and then the offensive line. There's a rookie at right guard. He's going to get tested. I'll be very curious about that. But just a very byproduct that they haven't been Rasheed Walker's taken left tackle and run with it. Zach Tom is Zach Tom. Elton Jenkins is Elton Jenkins. It's a pretty good offensive line. I don't see the glaring weakness on this roster right now. And Spoon, if I'm wrong, I encourage you to show me the error of my ways.
I don't see a glaring weakness. I think they need to be judged as a divisional playoff team. That was 2 minutes away from going to the NFC Championship, a 2-minute drive from going to the NFC Championship game. And that's the standard they need to be held to. And so I don't think it's, I think it is all hunky-dory during training camp, because unless there's a lot of injuries, this is a team that's should be in the mix to go to the Super Bowl. The only thing that changes is we've seen teams, come into the season look like they're loaded, and something happens. The Philadelphia Eagles are a great example last year. They go into the season and then something just crumbles, and you're not really sure exactly what it was. But, on paper, no, there shouldn't be any concern. To me, what will be a really good judge is, when they come out in the opening game and they play a really good Philadelphia team, and they have all this stuff. They have to go to Brazil, and, they're a marked team now. They're expected to win that game, and they should. So that's where it starts. We'll be talking a lot about their weaknesses if they lose that game, because it's a game they should win. It's a marquee game against a marquee opponent, and those are the type of games you got to win to get to the Super Bowl. So I think that's when the true judgment starts. But yeah, they've had a 4-leaf clover in their pocket through camp so far, and everything looks fine.
So Spoon, your one question with this team, and it's a good one, is whether or not they can handle being the marked team. Because last year they're this underdog feel-good story. No one expects anything from them, and they play great in that role. Now it's entirely different, right? Can they handle being the favorites?
I agree. Yes, I think that's a big part of it. Is their chemistry? Can they pick up the chemistry that they had at the end of the year? They didn't have it in the beginning of the year. They got it at the end of the year. They got in a row. Can you pick that up? Or does that have to be, reestablished throughout the season? Yeah. I do also think that as, promising as Josh Jacobs is, I don't think you can take away how important Aaron Jones was to their team, and he's gone. And I don't know how that played towards their chemistry and how crucial he was to them. I mean, he was just such a big threat that, You know, it opened up a lot of things for other people. So that'll be another issue. We'll see. You know, on paper, Josh Jacobs looks great. You know, led the league in rushing 2 years ago. But what if he's lost it? You know, what if there was a reason the Raiders got rid of him? And then it's A.J. Dillon and Marshawn Lloyd. So I think that is probably what needs to be seen, is whether they can have that kind of running threat and then have that chemistry.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that's absolutely a fair thing to wonder about this team. For me, the biggest question right now, as I look at this roster, there's so much youth. I just wonder if they're young enough that they're still 1 year away from being their best, right? It's a young man's game. I get that. But if you look at the recent history of the NFC, right, the Eagles beat the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, and then the 49ers go to the Super Bowl a year later. 49ers last year, they go through Detroit for the – I wonder if this is Detroit's year. That's going to be a massive storyline all season. Detroit, Green Bay. That's huge. Take nothing away from Caleb Williams in Chicago. We'll see, you know, obviously Aaron Jones in Minnesota. But this is Detroit, Green Bay. That's going to be a hell of a showdown this fall. Is this Detroit's year and then next year's Green Bay? Are they a year? Is this young Packers team a year away from being at its apex, or is it ready to go now? So neither my question nor your question has anything to do with the talent in this roster. I completely agree with you. They should be judged as a team that is a Super Bowl favorite. That is absolutely on a short list of teams, contenders that can come out of this NFC. This roster is that good. To me, it's the youth. To you, it's kind of a byproduct of the youth is, can they handle and do they have the maturity to handle being the favorites that they are now? That's really, it's not a question of talent. It's a question of where they're at in the pecking order and whether or not 2024 can be the year.
They are Ryan Wood and Tom Silverstein. Find everything they have at PackersNews.com or on the Green Bay Press Gazette or Milwaukee Journal Sentinel websites. They, of course, will be covering the Green Bay Packers throughout the rest of camp. There's the preseason game in Cleveland. Things really ramp up at that point all the way into that first week of the season in Brazil. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Not clear if I'll be on the next podcast. We're working toward finally getting a replacement for Cassidy, a full-time replacement for Cassidy. I know that fans are probably used to hearing me by now. I've been doing this since November. I think there'll be more of me. I'm not sure. So if not, appreciated everybody listening when I was on board, and hopefully you continue doing so. We'll have the big reveal on who the new person is as we go along here. But thank you guys for working with me, and I will talk to you again. We'll talk to you again very soon.
JR, let's hold on 1 second. Sure. Now. It's been great doing this with you as well. You've done a heck of a job filling in, so you deserve your flowers.
Well, thank you.
Well, we can't sign off without giving them to you.
It has been fun. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend it has not been fun to dive into the Packers. Who wouldn't want to do that? The Packers are awesome. They're very fun to talk about and think about. So it's been a really good time. You guys are great to work with. So again, I'm not sure. We don't really know the timeline on some of this stuff. So I may be back. I may not. We'll see. But
I got your phone number. I know where to find you if I when I get that fixed. And we'll hear from you again.
I'm terminally online. I am not hard to find. So.
Don't ever ask me about the white jerseys.
It's a great parting gift.
This is my end.
Come back. Then you can come back.
The end of my podcast tenure somehow coincides with me asking Spoon about jerseys. It's just a data point. That's all we're saying.
You're trying to get blackballed on your final episode potentially, weren't you?
Maybe.
How could I never come back with these two ever again? I know. Let's ask Spoon about the new white jerseys.
Yeah. They're great, I guess. All right, that'll do it. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.